Psychologist Paul Ekman is one of the most influential researchers in the study of human emotions. In the 1970s, he identified what he called six universal emotions, ones that are hardwired into all of us, regardless of culture or upbringing. They are joy, sadness, fear, anger, disgust, and surprise. These emotions aren't just feelings, they're tools for survival. They're fast, automatic, and primal. And they often are the first things to show up in a moment of crisis. You probably recognize these from the Pixar movie Inside Out, which brought Ekman's work to life through animated avatars inside the mind of a young girl. The film distilled things down to five emotions that serve as characters: joy, sadness, fear, anger, and disgust. Unfortunately, surprise got cut for narrative purposes. The film helped a lot of people, adults included, to see how complex and intertwined our emotional lives really are. Ekman is joined in the studies of emotions by many. There's all sorts of ways emotions can be organized and categorized. In a professional group I'm a part of, we use a tool called feelings inventory, which organizes emotional pillars into two groups: feelings when your needs are satisfied, and feelings when your needs are, wait for it, not satisfied. They break down different categories in each, whether it's excitement or engagement on the positive side, or feelings like embarrassment or pain on the unsatisfied side. As an eternal optimist, I'm drawn to the work of Barbara Fredrickson, who's taken the study of emotion in a different direction. Her broaden and build theory looks at what happens when we experience positive emotions, things like gratitude, hope, inspiration, amusement, love. Fredrickson found that while negative emotions narrow our focus, like tunnel vision and a threat, positive emotions do the opposite. They broaden our minds. They make us more creative, more open, more connected to other people. And over time, these moments of positivity help us build real psychological resources: resilience, optimism, perspective. Today's guest is not a subject matter on human emotions. He's simply a human who has been on the same emotional journey that I have since January 8th of 2025, trying to figure out how to be the best dad, partner, professional, architect, insurance analyst, and all of the other new roles we've had to take on in the wake of the Eaton fire. On today's show, we're going to zag a little bit. All right. In episode one, we explored the impact of our local government on Altadena's recovery. And so we brought on a political science professor. Episode two centered on grief. So we brought on the director of a grief institute. Episode three had a structural engineer give us a quick rebuilding 101 lesson. Episode four centered around somebody who lost his home in another wildfire and built it back himself. With episode five, we had a local realtor provide us with insights into the current and future real estate landscape. And episode six brought two of the most experienced wildfire attorneys in the state of California to preview what's ahead with Edison. Six clear topics amplified by six specialists in those fields. But episode seven, I'm bringing on a friend. My guest today is Neil Tyler. Neil and I met years back at a dad's event for our children's school, Jackson Elementary. We hit it off immediately. He's the kind of guy you can talk to about anything, and he'll hear your opinion, share his own, and really make you challenge your initial position. Perhaps that's why Neil's a successful lawyer. However, that's not why Neil's here today. Rather, Neil's here to do something middle-aged men rarely do, and certainly not on a public forum like this. He accepted an invitation to come on the pod and talk about his feelings. In fact, we both are. Inspired by Ekman, Fredrickson, and the feelings inventory tool, I decided to ask a series of questions that center on emotions I want to hear from Neil on: nostalgia, gratitude, sadness, anger, fear, joy, and hope, just to name a few. We share stories connected to these emotions, and something became clear about this episode as we were taping. Something I hadn't expected. These feelings and vignettes are the best summation I've been able to muster about what the first 22 days, the first 120 days have been like after the wildfire. What it's like to cry, laugh, lose, and be grateful in a span of like 10 seconds. How your mind fluctuates from knowing nothing to feeling confident in where you stand. How you can reflect with a little space on what happened, how it moved you, and even drastically change who you are today, just 4 months later. Here are two stories, a small sample size, given the breadth of people who have gone through this transformation, that shine a light on the emotional complexities of losing your home in a wildfire and having to navigate all of the next steps as your world has been ripped apart. I'm Austin LaRoche, and this is the Altadena Rebuild, episode 7, Inside Out.
Neil Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So in our intro, which you have not heard, we have identified you as a friend of mine, a fellow dad at the elementary school, Jackson. You've got some kids in elementary school, and now you've lost your home and the fire. Oh, and I also mentioned that you were an attorney in the entertainment industry. So that's all the audience knows about you right now. So why don't you give us a little Reader's Digest of, before the fire, Neil, and now after the fire, Neil?
Sure. So everything you said is accurate. I'll try to fill in some of the gaps. So I grew up on the East Coast, just outside D.C. in Rockville, Maryland. Grew up there, was there till college, went to school on the East Coast for college, and then after that moved out to Southern California. Met my wife in San Diego, who's born and raised Californian. I dragged her willingly, but a little hesitant over to the East Coast again for grad school. And then we've been back in LA area, LA County ever since 2014. We lived in Pasadena for a little while and then moved to Altadena in our house that eventually burned down. We actually bought it 4 years to the day before the fire, which is just crazy coincidence. We have 2 kids at Jackson, as you mentioned. Great, amazing kids, 1 boy, 1 girl. And then post-fire, we were very fortunate to find a great long-term rental house in La Cañada. So that's where you can see me sitting right now.
We're going to zigzag between some of the pleasant and unpleasant things that we've dealt with, and we're just kind of going to dive in. And so the first thing I want to start with is nostalgia. So in the TV show Mad Men, one of my favorite shows, the last episode of the first season, Don has this big pitch for Kodak, and he tells a story about a guy named Teddy the Greek, who said that in Greek, nostalgia literally means the pain from an old wound. And I kind of always thought of my interpretation is nostalgia is kind of like something that you yearn for from your past that you can never have again, despite how bad you want it. And I don't know that those two interpretations are like crazy far apart, but I do think that there's this blend of loss, but also this, like the kind of Dr. Seuss thing, like smile that it happened, right? The bittersweet joy that it happened in the first place. So with all of this, what are you most nostalgic for when it comes to your pre-fire life?
Yeah, have to say, I think I lean towards your definition a little more, but I can see the connection. Few things come to mind. So the first is just how easy life was in general before the fire. Like you really had to worry about being a good employee, being a good husband, parent, life partner. And then everything else was kind of leisure and fun. And yes, there'd be hiccups, but for the most part, those were your responsibilities and focus. And now post-fire, it's like juggling 12 balls at once. You're not only an employee and a parent and a husband and all those things you were before, but now you're a specialist in insurance and a specialist in general contracting and a specialist in knowing all the different contractors and vendors you need to support that rebuild. And then you're tracking the political push in the community to make the situation better and a better environment and city for the future. And then there's the SCE lawsuits. It's just all these things that are related but distinct. And if you want to stay up to date and be knowledgeable, it takes so much time on each of those things. And it's really hard to balance them all and be good at all of them at once, let alone even 1 or 2 at once. So just kind of miss the easy life pre-fire, number 1. Number 2, our house. We absolutely loved our house. As I said, we bought it 4 years to the day of the fire, and we will be back there again. We're rebuilding, and our goal is to recapture that look and feel of the house we had. So maybe that is something in the nostalgia world that it won't be exactly the same, but we'll be able to recapture an element of that. That's the hope.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I'm joking about our brain as a pie chart and how so many things have come into the pie chart from before. And it kind of just, even like on my best work days, I'm like 70%, right? Because it's just, there's only so much capacity up here. and there's so much from that other stuff. And I like what you said about your home, because like when I think about like those home sweet home moments, where I have this weird nostalgia for. I felt like anytime I come back from a business trip, and I only travel maybe once every other month. It wasn't crazy, but somehow like my flight would get in between like 7 and 9, so I wouldn't be home until like 9 and 11, and then everyone else in the house would be asleep, and so I would come in quietly, and the dog would I'd be like, shh, shh, and then I'd have to kind of let him out of my son's room, and then I'd be a little wired, and so we would just kind of sit there on the couch. And I'd be home with the dog, and we'd watch a little TV. That's why I got caught, because he used to not be allowed on the couch. And then in those moments, I started sneaking him on. And so yeah, I definitely, I miss the couch, the feeling of like, because that kind of like cement it, right? Like, I'm back. Okay. Now I can get back to my normal life. And that was always my symbol. But, we'll go through some of the tougher stuff in a little bit. You and I, we saw each other at a social event a couple weeks ago. I know that not everything is doom and gloom. And so as we've gone through this 120 days in, what have you been grateful for? Like, where have you been able to find gratitude?
Yeah, just what really stands out and what I say to people is maybe the only silver lining out of all of this is just seeing how the community, LA in general, but especially like the Altadena, Pasadena community, how it rallied around everyone. Like, my feeling just over the last, let's say 10 years was just people kept growing farther apart day by day, with rise of social media and just, the way people interact, it was always combative, and your differences kind of were more pronounced than your similarities. And almost immediately after the fire, it was like, everyone's in this together. Everyone's here to support each other, whether you were a fortunate person that wasn't, directly impacted by the fire, but in the community, or you were someone who lost everything like us. Everyone was there to support each other, provide advice, provide goods, discounts, hugs, just kind words, support, all of that stuff. And it was really heartwarming, like to the point of tears. Just some of the interactions you would have with people in the immediate aftermath. And even up till now, like there's interactions I have with friends, family, and even complete strangers that just, when you're in the thick of it and you're down, you'll just have that one interaction where you're just like, people at their core are really good. And it was an amazing reminder that like the world is truly still like that.
Yeah, gosh, I couldn't agree more. And I've got some things to say on the social media side in a little bit.
Oh yeah, we'll vent a little bit as we go.
Yeah, good gosh. Yeah, there's been so many cool things. I think a lot of like specific streets and neighborhoods, that we all talk about all being trauma bonded now. And I think about what it was like before, and then what it's going to be like after, in terms of just like, I want to throw a party every single time somebody moves into their house, right? Like I'm just I'm just thinking about those weeks and months and how exciting that's going to be. Oh my gosh, so and so's back in, right? I'll add to what you're saying, because on the front grounds, you're 100% right. Like, so many people were so amazing, donating all of the things. But one of the things that was really crazy for me was I kind of moved around a lot, like you. I grew up in Atlanta. I went to school in Florida, went to Chicago after school, then was in New Orleans for a little bit, came out here. Anna was a very similar story, from Minnesota, lived in Michigan, Ohio. And so when all of this happened, and it kind of was funneled through a GoFundMe, but people who were like donating and sharing, they were from like every walk of life that I had ever been in, and like, I sometimes think I'm a bit of a polarizing person. Like, I know that I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but like people I went to high school with, like I hadn't talked to in 20 plus years. And they're like, hey, this is a great guy I went to high school with. Did you have anything extra you can donate here? And just to share, I don't care about the money, right? The thought, the action, oh my gosh, like I couldn't believe like I didn't realize I had a tribe the way that I did. Like, I couldn't believe all the people that showed up for me in a way that I was just like, I remember saying, it's so hard to feel sad when I've never felt this loved in my life. And I think that goes back to that point of like, everybody is good. Like, one thing you didn't mention, but is definitely a part of it, is like, we're coming off of a presidential election where everybody hates each other the most, right? And I tell you, a lot of people in my life are on each side of the aisle. None of them really cared when it came to me. All they cared about was helping me. And I really feel like, kind of when we start, like, these events really make me believe in the good in people, and also made me realize just what what an influence so much of this stuff has on our lives, media and social media. And, it was incredible to see people at their core being so good.
Yeah. One thing I'll add, I remember saying this maybe like week 1 or 2, just turning to my wife and being like, wow, we really have an amazing network and friends. And we've always worked very hard to maintain relationships with like the people that are really important to us in our lives. I'm super good friends with a lot of people from my high school still, talk to them regularly. And just like the support they showed, as well as, like you said, every step of the way, from college, from law school, from business school, from just living in Long Beach for a year and a half. Like, all these things just really manifested themselves in that one really post-traumatic week or two, where you could just see the outpouring, the texts and everything from people you hadn't talked to in maybe a decade. And it was just as if they were willing to like stop their lives just to help you. Like, it really shows how important maintaining those relationships and not letting them fade away too much, because you never know when those people will be able to help you or be there for you. And now I want to pass it forward and be there for them if they ever need me. It's just a really heartwarming feeling and reminder of like the power of relationships in life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was calling it a little bit through tribes too. Like, wow, these communities that we're a part of. I'm a part of an entrepreneur community. Anna's really involved with the Pasadena Pacer running community. And so many people just came, it's just more the more you put in, the more you get out. I think really saw that. Okay. So we're going to go in the opposite direction here. All right. There's a lot that people have been angry about since the fire. Like, the community is outrage central. So I'm going to let you blow off some steam. What has angered you the most here in these first 4 months?
Yeah. Venting time. It's time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with one thing that comes to mind from the very early days. So as we just talked about, there was such like an outpouring of love and support, and just, you'd walk into a store, whatever store you walked into first, to get those basic emergency supplies, clothes and bathroom stuff. And just like, you'd go up to the counter, someone would, quietly ask, like, did you lose your house? And then they just like give you a hug and do what they could, find a discount. If you asked for like history of your purchases, thinking about insurance down the road and what you needed to replace, like, they would just bend over backwards to do that for you. But there was this one store that I went to, I'm not going to name it, but I went to it in Pasadena probably 5 or 6 times just to get like, basic clothes and towels and, different things you need for your house. I probably interacted with 30 employees in that store. Not once did a single person in that store like acknowledge what the situation was, give you a smile, even say, I'm sorry. When we would try to ask them for help of like order history or returns, they would make us feel like we were like bothering them and inconveniencing them. And yes, this is like a small grievance, but just in the moment when it was contrasted with just the outpouring of love and support from literally every other community member in every business, it was just such a stark thing that stands out in my mind. And I've said, like, we can never shop in that store again. So public vent about that now complete. Curious, I have one more that's more recent, but curious if you have something, that stands out in your mind from the early days.
from the early days, I mean, you and I sidebarred about just how long it took them to be able to get both private and public debris removal working together. So early days, that was definitely just infuriating to me because I felt like there's such a great opportunity for the message to be, we've got public, we've got private, we've got everybody clearing it out. Like, let's go. And, you know, it took a little longer. They got there. They have a lot of challenges, but I would just say it felt very much like it felt like there could have been a much more coordinated effort between both private and public to really get going. So that was where I was early on. Where I'm at right now is definitely, and listen, I get it. I would say neighborhood groups of any sort, whether it's next door or on Facebook groups or whatever, is even when you don't have a fire, might be one of the worst places on earth. But the amount of was so policing and people who want to just tell everyone what to do, and then even just like an outrage, like that I don't even understand. Like, somebody finds a vendor who's a little bit cheaper than somebody else, and everyone goes, "I bet they're not really good. No, it shouldn't cost that cheap." You're like, what? You're shaming people for getting a deal, or shaming for giving a discount to fire victims? They come on, and I try to avoid them as best I can. But unfortunately, maybe going back to episode 1, we talked about being unincorporated. That is where we get the most information right now. We don't have that Altadena weekly website of where, you know, Walter Cronkite, gives us a fair and unbalanced review of everything that's going on. We doesn't have that. So in between actual helpful information that we do get here and there, we do have to see maybe the worst side of some people. Not everyone, obviously, but you see some of the worst sides of some people in those groups.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a part of a couple organizations kind of just focused on connecting community members and making sure people are able to get the info they need. And at least in those, like, everyone's very conscious about not soliciting, not pushing anyone in any specific direction. But, you know, that's hard to police, and it's hard to maintain that if someone feels very passionately about an issue and someone else feels passionately on the other side. That being said, I will say, you know, you mentioned like the presidential race and kind of politics in general. It's still way healthier than that national scale of what we've been seeing. So I can put up with some of this back and forth in the grand scheme of things. To just respond about something that's top of everyone's mind and becoming, you know, a bigger issue day by day. And that's probably my biggest frustration now. It's got to be insurance. I mean, everyone is complaining about it. You're a very rare situation if your insurance interactions and process has gone smoothly. I personally have State Farm. I feel like they are somewhat public enemy number one. You can kind of read about it and some of the pushback from the community and just practices they're rolling out. I will say I had a great adjuster. I now am on my second. So far, so good. But just kind of what it feels like behind the scenes is going on with State Farm, with some of the practices that they have been doing for both remediation and for people with total losses like myself. It's just not the right approach and feels in many ways unfair and damaging to the community. And I've said that to State Farm themselves. So I just have to vent about that. Hopefully, if this public grievance about, you know, insurance help in a little way, have policyholders be treated more fairly, want to make, you know, just the effort to do that.
Yeah, State Farm has been awful, particularly people without total losses who, you know, whose houses are still standing but need real remediation. We've got some close friends who've been in that boat, and it's, you know, they had to, once the lawyer got involved, and maybe they picked up the pace a little bit. But yeah, I mean, my 11-year-old son, he's like, I used to love the commercials, but they are not a good neighbor. They are not there for you. He likes that part. So, yeah. You know, as we look to the future, and, you know, you've said some very nice things about the show, so I know you'd listen. And No, I'm very bullish on Altadena, but that doesn't mean we don't have a little bit of anxiety, a little fears. Where you have a little bit of fear of kind of what's ahead.
Yeah, I'm not too fearful about Altadena. Maybe early on I was. As the weeks and months go on, I'm more hopeful than fearful about the community and the city itself. I'm more fearful of just what long-term impact this is going to have on myself and my family and our kind of, personalities and interactions with each other and just the world at large. There's such deep trauma that came from this. I've been through a lot over the last 5 to 10 years, personally and with my family, but nothing compares to just, in 1 hour, you got to leave your house and then you lose everything and never expected it. And picking up those pieces and trying to balance, all the various things and keep pushing the ball forward doesn't always give you the time to properly process the trauma and grief, and even take a step back and try to think about what your significant other or your kids are going through and try to work through that in a constructive way. And it's that probably my lowest points during this first 120 days is all related to that. And my hope is that it's short-term and temporary, and we'll, take the steps and make the efforts to make sure it is that. But you don't always know what is underlying and what will simmer for months or years ahead. And that's what I'm most fearful of, just the natural emotional impact of all of this and how long it lasts.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, so my son's in 5th grade, so it's, let's say, 8 to 10 years he'll be in college. And at some point, they'll be like, tell me something about yourself. And he was like, remember those LA fires? Like, I lost my house in it. And somebody's going to go, what was that? And, I feel like I'm doing everything I can so that it's, almost like I think of it as kind of like a long distance relationship, right? Like, it's like this thing that you had to do, but you knew there was an end date. And so it wasn't ideal, but you kind of made the best of it. You made some good memories in between. Like, that's like my hope. But you're right. Like, we have no clue. We're just in the early innings of this thing, right? So
yeah,
even like my kids right now are showing up really good. But, what happens, when the younger one is, you had a nightmare months ago about the idea of a fire, but that hasn't lingered. But who knows? It's, that definitely the mental health of these kids, especially, unfortunately, they're COVID kids too. They went through that at a young age. They're just, hoping that they can grow and become resilient from this, as opposed to it just, putting them in a constant state of anxiety and fear. I mean, that's absolutely there. I'll add a tactical one. I think you really hit it on the emotional side, but I feel like, the permit process they've laid out has been pretty clear. They have community ordinances that are quite expansive. And I feel like they're saying all the right things about wanting to get things cleared. But I mean, they've only got 500 permits right now, and they've only given out 4 or 5. The way that we've done this, if I'm going to be fair, is it's like nothing happens, and then the floodgates open, and then everything happens. So I want to be wrong on this, but I have a little bit of fear that I'm just going to be spending the next 8 months going back and forth trying to get a permit instead of being able to really break ground and get going, with the hope of back in my house, right? Building my house and getting back, I think, is most important. But I also understand they have to have that so that, we have tight lots. You can't wake up one day and have an 8-story building next to you, So it's not like I think whole exercises, people. I'm just worried that I'm going to be wasting a lot more time in permit hell than I am in break ground and get down to business.
Yeah. I mean, super valid concerns. To go to the hope side about the community, definitely a little concerning that things haven't moved quicker, but there have been, already pushes to streamline things. And a lot of people kind of came out and tried to, advocate through the government and our representatives to make this better. Because right at the start, like you said, there were only, 3 or 4 permits that were issued. And it seems like that kind of political pressure and community activism is very effective, and people are listening and making things happen. You know, for example, the permitting was always separate in different buildings and different areas of LA County. And, you know, if I'm understanding it correctly, like a recent change that was made based on that pressure was tried to centralize everything in one location in one office so that departments could interact and do what they need to do to clear and approve the permits quicker. So again, like kind of a wait and see, maybe a lot of talk, but there's at least some hope in my mind of if issues are identified and pushed for, like people are responding and trying to help them streamline things.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of splintered things, right? Like Newtham and Caruso with the AI tool, which is going to be interesting when that gets rolled out, where essentially you're going to be able to put your plans through there and they're going to try and tell you, no, that you need to move this set needs to be here. That's interesting. And then you've got, well, the mayor, Karen Bass, she's made it easier for the Palisades to be able to build, but she's LA and we're county. So we're LA County, not the city. And we haven't got anything. But to your point, I'm hoping that political pressure does ease things up and makes it a little bit more streamlined. Let's go to something a little bit more exciting, a little more positive. Let's go to amusement. Okay. Like we've been allowed to laugh in our trauma and all of our times. When has been a time that you just stands out that either put a massive smile on your face or made you laugh, give you a good laugh?
Yeah. So this is maybe not your traditional kind of like just laugh out loud, that was hilarious type amusement or joy, but just like the world works in such amazing ways sometimes and just like really makes you happy. So like I said, we really lucked out getting our long-term rental in La Cañada, and we're very fortunate to work with our longtime real estate agent who happened to know a great agent in La Cañada. And I don't know if you experienced this early on or if you hit the ground looking for alternative places, but the market was insane. Like the house we ended up getting had 25 applications, 100 calls about it, all in 36 hours. And we just happened to have this agent, local agent in La Cañada, who has been here for decades and happened to know the listing agent. And just, again, the power of relationships, like I attribute most of it to that relationship working in our favor. So that's how kind of very quick we got our place. And about a week or two after we moved in, that agent called and said, hey, the house across the street is up for rent. Do you know anyone that, would be interested in this property in this area at like this price? And we were like, we have one couple that we think would fit the bill. And it happened to be our next door neighbors right across the street, whose house also burned down in Altadena. And we called them up, and within like 2 days, they were then again renting the house directly across the street from us on our new street in La Cañada. And like our kids are friends, we are friends. We've been doing dinners back and forth with each other, like just call up and like, hey, can my son come over and play for an hour? And it's just like the world aligned to keep this relationship going that we had in Altadena on our road, build that relationship. And it was just like the world speaking in the proper way to keep that going and just kind of supplant the R2 houses now in this new area while we work to rebuild.
And that's incredible. I feel like that just the normalcy for the kids to be able to go across and see the neighbors. We will do meetups, and it's so nice, right? With like once a month, we get to everybody together who can, and it's just so nice seeing everybody. But like to have that every day, that must be so wonderful for your kids, man.
Yeah, I'll share. Seeing them ride bikes like in the little cul-de-sac is unbelievable.
That's funny. That makes me laugh about Altadena because we live in a cul-de-sac, except does not cul-de-sac, just ends. Street just ends.
There's no turning around.
The 1920s land grab. No. So, my story, I laughed really hard. This was the Wednesday morning of the fire. We exiled down to Orange County. And, when you don't buy a ton of clothes, you kind of get something here or there. you don't realize just how much you have. And we've been buying a lot of clothes in the last 5 years from the war, athleisure, Grand. And so you're like, oh, let's go there. And so we got like a few things. And the lady looked at my son and goes, oh, why aren't you at school today? And he's like, oh, we lost our house in fire, and then just killed Anna. And she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And she gave us 40% off. And it was still like way too much money. It's like, oh, I can't be, wow, holy crap. Like, okay, like put a few items back. We'll take a few. And then like, we got to reconfigure if we're going to, get clothes for the week. And so we were like, you know what we should do? We'll go to H&M. So we paid for the clothes. We got that 40% off discount. And then we went over to H&M where the shirts are $7. And we're getting all the stuff that we need for the week. And I stand in line, and my oldest, he's 11. He comes up and he goes, you going to ask him? I goes like, about what? He's like, the homeless discount. And I was like, and I think the most amusing part is like, that was like one of the most like, oh, that's definitely my son moments. Like 9 out of the 10 areas in life where I've like gotten in the most trouble is because I was trying to be funny in a situation I shouldn't have been. So it was not only that I feel like he stuck the landing, it definitely made me appreciative and embarrassed of my genes all at once. You should be proud,
Proud of the wit and quick humor.
I love it. All right, so let's jump over to surprise. I feel like surprise as an emotion is like kind of like the Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde, right? Surprise parties, like, oh my God, that's so nice. Surprise bill from Edison a month after they've been investigated for the fire for a house that you're no longer living in. Not a great surprise. Positive or negative, you can go either way. What surprised you the most in this first 120 days?
I'll go the more practical route on this one. I think just what the Army Corps is doing and how quickly they are doing it. I personally hired a private contractor for various reasons, but I'd say the vast majority of people in the community have, gone the Army Corps, public debris removal route. And I think their original timeline was, we're going to clear everything within 1 year to the day of the fire. And everyone was like, that's not going to happen. Like, look at the sheer size of it, 12,000 structures, all this complexity. This is the government. They're not going to get their act together. And I think last time I saw, they're clearing like 60 to 80 structures a day with like over 100 crews. And their timeline is maybe by the end of July. I'm sure, there'll be hiccups and some more complex properties and areas and corporate buildings. Maybe you'll slow down the timeline, but for a government-run program to be 6 months ahead of schedule is pretty amazing and extremely surprising, at least.
I'm gonna have to come up with a new answer because you stole mine. I couldn't agree more. I have the same one written down. I was like, I've heard 18 months originally, then it got to 12 months, and now I think it's supposed to be done by summer. They just released something the other day. Private debris removal's got to be done by June 30th, or it's going to be considered a public nuisance. What was that? Them saying all public stuff's going to be cleared by then. So I completely shocked in the best way. I still think it's, if your insurance can pay for the debris removal, it makes sense to go and do it one time because I know they can. The Army Corps can only do so much. We already had the anger moment, so I'm not gonna harp on that. But, but I think it's great, and they've been fast, they've been wonderful, and we'll get to it in a little bit. But I think the experience of having a blank canvas instead of a rubble of what was there before is, for many people, very refreshing, and I think it signifies a step in a direction of hope. And so I, as much as I probably said many bad things about the government and their ability to move this up quickly in January, February, I am happily surprised. I will eat all the crow. I wanted to be wrong on that one. I was wrong on that one. And I'm so glad that so much of the community already has their lots cleared. And I can't wait for June 30th. What if we're almost completely done? I mean, that's like 50 days away. Like, how cool would that be?
Yeah. I mean, it'd be amazing to drive down these streets in Altadena and not see rubble anymore. And like, yes, it'll be super weird where you can look down, several streets and just see it without, trees and structures there. But like you said, there's kind of a turn in the whole process once, at least from my point of view. I know others may differ and have different reactions, but once the debris is gone, like you said, it kind of starts to tip to hope and focusing on the future. And it's a really kind of relieving moment when you go to your property and are, stepping on your, twisted copper and metal and all that.
Yeah, it's actually funny. Anna had to warn me because she was like that's going to be harder for me because then it's like gone. And I was like, huh? Like, oh my gosh, like, really? Because like I was like so on the other boat. I was like, yeah, up tomorrow. Yeah, And it is. It kind of goes back to that thing. We're all just trying to do the best we can and get at the right pace. Or I don't know. There is no right pace, right? We're just trying to be there for one another. And the more you communicate, you're able to say like, hey, like this is going to be tough. The more you can kind of go into an event that, say, joyous for one person, it's more of a challenge for another. But I do think in time, it feels good. Blank canvas feels nice. It feels like possibility and hope instead of like destruction and, what was.
Yep. Couldn't agree more.
All right. So we gotta hit the tough stuff, right? Sadness, right? Maybe we call it depression. We can call it rock bottom. And we've all shed some tears these last few months. What was your low point? Like, how did, what got you there?
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a lot of low points. Being honest, this week is one of the harder weeks, just based on how things go. It's a roller coaster, and sometimes you feel like you got it all in hand and moving forward, and then sometimes just everything weighs you down and you kind of feel like you're not doing what you can and should be in that situation. But definitely the rock bottom, if we're just going to focus on the worst, was on the early side. Within the first month, it was probably week 2 or 3. I think you're very similar to me. Like, we're both type A. The morning of the fire, I was like, we got to find a new place to live. We got to get clothes. I need to file that insurance claim. We got to start documenting things. Like, just here's the checklist and I'm going to start checking. And that was my way of coping and caring for the family and moving things forward. And, I knew we need to be stable, number one, and then we need to work to get back to where we were as quick as possible. And I will be the first to admit it. I don't think that's the healthiest way to cope with things, but it was the way in that moment I was able to deal with everything and feel like I was being productive and not helpless in this situation where, Mother Nature just ripped everything away from us. So probably that was what I was doing for the first 2 or 3 weeks. And my wife was taking a very different approach. I think she's much more similar to your wife as well, where, there was a much more focus on, I need to go through the rubble and sift for things. I need to, kind of give myself space to mourn and grieve before I can focus on all the steps I need. And just as we were taking these different approaches, both with the same good intentions of moving our family forward and making sure we're healthy and caring for our children and getting them stable back in school and at home. Personally, in like hour to hour, we were just taking different approaches, and it just reached this kind of breaking point. And I can remember the specific day where it was just, I felt like I was taking on everything and I wasn't able to do it all without help. And she just in the moment wasn't capable of kind of getting the emotions and her life in check to give that help that I felt I needed. And this is all just kind of personal, being at different places in the recovery. And it just reached kind of a breaking point where, like, I remember breaking down, crying, and just like kind of getting to the core of what was bothering me, and just like the fear I had of our lives being forever changed. And this, we had been through so much, this kind of like ripping us apart because it's the most traumatic thing. And to end on a better note, ever since that moment, like once we communicated and realized where the other person was and how we were feeling and talked it through, like we've been an amazing team moving forward, tagging in and out on different things that are needed at different moments based on how people are. Like I said, this week was tough. I tagged in to help out with something a few days ago. She's tagged in to help me when I've like reached a low point. So really kind of like embracing what you're feeling and facing it and talking with those in the thick of it with you ends up being productive, even if it does lead you to that darkest or rock bottom moment like I just described.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that, man. I was feeling a lot when you said that, because I had a very similar moment. We actually, we had a date night sometime, I think it was in February, and we stopped at the Good Neighbor bar. So for any non-Altadenans listening, they finally opened up a cool bar in Altadena, like that, I don't know, a couple months before the fire, and I hadn't got the chance to go yet. And we were sitting there, and it was kind of like, I'm doing the thing where I'm like, hey, we're on a date night, like, like they can't take everything from us, right? Like we can have all of this, and, started, maybe letting, talking a little bit more about my opinions and kind of like it's just stuff and that kind of stuff. And I just realized that this domineering, like, voice that I can have was like such an opposite place of where she was on. And that had to made it 10 times harder for her to be, because I think my kids are kind of a little bit like me. Like the second I told my 11-year-old in his next house he could have a hot tub, he's like, great, I'm good. And, and so it was like, I feel like we all kind of find loneliness in this journey because we are already experiencing it in different ways. But I felt like, oh my gosh, like she's like alone and like completely away. And like going back to that, what you were saying, type A, like what do I do when there's a problem? I got to fix it. I've been around enough, and she's a therapist, so I know you can't fix people. You can't fix that problem. And so that helplessness of like, oh my gosh, like I want you to feel a certain way, which is a stupid thing. You can't really do that with people. That's not how relationships work. But that's the feeling that you have because like that's just, it's there, and you feel so helpless, and you're just like, okay, I'm going to have to take a step back. I'm going to have to keep communicating. I'm going to have to ask where you want me to be. I'm going to have to also try and do the move where I figure out where you want me to be before you ask. Because that's what you really want, and I'm not that good that I can always do it, but I got to try a little bit better. Like the mind reading is tough. Like, really? Yeah, right? Mind reading. That's constant. But yeah, but I think most people that I've talked to, like it's, that is the hard part. Like, whether you call it grieving or dealing with the trauma, like everybody being able to do that in a way that brings us all together instead of ripping us all apart. And I think to your point, there's going to be good times and bad, right? There's going to be things that make one person sad and one person hopeful. And even going back to the conversation I was talking about with when our debris was going to be removed and like feeling that was going to be different. So I think you really hit the nail on the head. It's like, you just got to talk this stuff out. I mean, that's your only way. That otherwise, that maybe you hit a rock bottom in the future that you don't even know is coming.
Yeah. The one other thing I'll add on that exact last point is sometimes you also got to know when to talk it out. Like it may not be the moment where both of you are in the same space to have that tough conversation. And, you kind of got to, like you said, you got to kind of read the mind and try to figure out when is the right time and when's the wrong time to work through some of these issues. And it's all just a struggle, but we're living through it, and we'll be better for it in the long run. And hopefully be more prepared to cope with all the issues that are inevitably going to come up.
Yeah. Just wait till the contractors start. That's going to be a whole new headache, right? Oh yeah. We'll do a sequel to this, for the Q1 of 2026. All right. We're going to shift to some more positive, and that's where we're going to land this plane. Let's talk about joy, right? Fire can take a lot of things from us. we talked earlier about gratitude. We talked earlier about amusement. I know sometimes these emotions are synonymous, but where are you getting joy these days?
Yeah, but very related to some prior answers, but just like these little moments of kindness that you just get from the most unexpected places. I'll drill down a little bit more with one example. So right before the fire, in pretty much the second half of December, we did a huge trip to Germany, France, and Switzerland to like go to the famous Christmas markets in those areas and just kind of have this cold weather vacation that isn't usual to us. And it was super memorable, amazing. Pretty much we took the approach of like, hey kids, at each one of these markets, you can get like one, low priced item as a memento. So they came back like, you're figuring out how do we fit all this in our suitcases. Came back and got it home. Nothing broke miraculously, and placed them in, the kids' rooms and everything. And there were some like really treasured ones and some that were like, okay, we got this at, this market. But, a week later, all of that was gone. And we were, starting to like document what we had in the various places of our houses. And I remember asking the kids early on, like, what are the 3 most important things that you had that you want me to try to get back? And let me tell you, it was a great question asked, but like some of this stuff to replace was very hard and challenging and took up some time, but like to bring the joy to the kids' faces when we succeeded was great. But to get back on track, this one thing that my daughter said was this kind of like glass star that she got at the first Christmas market that we visited in Germany. And it was at this just random stand in Germany that we didn't know the name, like the credit card bill just had a German, holding company on it. And we didn't have a picture of it. We had a picture of like the stole in the corner or something, but we didn't really know how to do it. And my wife just posted on one of these like Christmas market groups that we had done all our research on and gotten itineraries, just explaining the situation and saying like, hey, you might have heard we lost everything in the fire. And like my daughter really loved this one item. Like, does anyone have any? And like, it was almost like 18 private eyes kicked into full gear and started investigating. And we're on the ground in Germany and like found this vendor to provide us with the opportunity to like reach out to them. And then the vendor responded, was like, I'm going to ship it to you for free. We have 2 left in storage. Let me get it. Let me make your daughter happy. And not only did that come in the mail, a few weeks later and brought this massive smile to my daughter's face, but then like all these just completely random strangers that we'd never met in our life really like were touched by my wife's post, and they've mailed like mugs from there, handwritten notes that like bring a tear to your eye. Just like I think my wife is going to meet with someone who is going to happen to be in LA just to like talk with her. Just complete stranger. Just like, again, the relationships and the kindness that people have in their heart is just so heartwarming. And it's probably my favorite memory of this, because it's just complete strangers doing purely unselfish things just to make both us and our kids feel better in the moment.
Oh man, mine's going to sound so pedantic next to that. That's awesome. It was wonderful. Yeah, that's great. I'll tell you a little bit about mine. There's something about my cleared lot that just brings me up that way all the time. And yesterday we kind of did like a little tag team. It's like, okay, Anna's going to drop Xavier off at track. I'm going to go get some groceries. Then I'm going to go pick Xavier up at track. Then Anna's going to go to the school open house. We're all going to get back and have dinner together, right? And so I get the groceries and I realize I've got enough time before I have to pick him up, and it's on the way. So I go and I stop at the lot and I pull up, and Anna's there because she's dropped Xavier off and she's got enough time before the open house and it's on the way. And so we were just able to kind of have a little walk around the lot. And, that was the first time we had like a serendipitous moment with that. But I just get so much energy and excitement being there. I feel like I can kind of see what's going to happen next. And then I'll tell you another thing that's a little funny is I drink a lot of this water and tea throughout the day, and I used to work from home, and I have these back-to-back Zoom meetings, right? And so in our back shed, we didn't have a bathroom back there, so I would just run behind the shed, and I would just go pee in a tree real quick. And I don't know why, but I feel like every time I'm up there, I'm somehow peeing on our big oak tree that still made it. And something about that gives me so much joy. Like I'm still in my back.
Well, you got to water it somehow. Practice.
I'm probably killing it.
Those things can go through a lot, as we've seen.
Oh, all right, Neil. Last question. For anybody who listens, you guys know that we're trying everything that we can to be able to look at this rebuild through the lens of hope. So here we are, where we've made it to hope. Hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things. What makes Neil Tyler hopeful about the road ahead?
Yeah, honestly, just where Altadena is going to end up. Like I said, I'm not fearful for where the community is going to be. It's been amazing seeing how people have rallied together, how many people who have lived here for decades or like me moved in recently just absolutely love the community and found it to be like the place they were meant to end up. And there's so many people that are just connecting with each other and helping each other through the process and educating each other and really digging in for like the long and tough work that's ahead, not only personally to get back to their home and where they were before the fire, but also to make Altadena even better, whether it be, power lines under the ground or extended sewers or better water, pressure in systems. Whatever it is, like there's so many people that have just dedicated themselves to that cause generally or a specific aspect of it. And when you try to get all this information and happen to come in contact with all these different initiatives and people all working towards that common goal, it really brings me hope because I was very nervous. People are just going to, everyone's going to want to sell. They're going to be nervous what it's going to look like, but it's been almost the opposite. Yes, there's those things going on, but the vast majority of at least people I've interacted with are planning a rebuild and try to, build back better. That, famous phrase we heard for 120 days. So I'm very hopeful. And I hope that my hope remains as we keep going along this long path.
Man, and it's cool. It's funny because mine is kind of tangential to a conversation you and I had a few months ago where you were like, I'm worried about the trees. Like I love the nature and all that. And I've always joked that no one's ever been like, Austin, super spirit-filled. Yeah. Okay. But when I do feel most spirit-filled is in nature, right? We're going to go camping in Yosemite in a couple of weeks. Stand under one of those thundering waterfalls and man, you feel it, right? And so I'm always kind of got my eye on nature. And after the rains, we have 0 rains before the fire and it's been raining ever since, it seems like.
Yep.
You look up on the mountains and you just start seeing all the green coming back. Not anywhere where it's going to be. But to me, it's like that sign, right? That nature's telling us like, Mother Nature's been through a ton of wildfires. Like we've done this before. Okay. And we've come back and you're going to come back. And I know one of the phrases we have is the rose will bloom again. I was going down the street the other day and we got roses blooming in a bunch of yards that have been cleared out of almost everything else. And I feel like when I look at nature, I'm like, okay, something bigger than us is leading this. We're going to follow suit. We're going to be all right. I think we're going to be okay. You think we're going to be all right now?
I agree. The hope is shared by both of us, for sure.
Awesome. Well, Neil, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and being vulnerable and being able to tell us a little bit about your experience. It's always great to be able to hear other stories and how you've been able to deal with everything.
Yeah. No, really appreciate you inviting me on and keep it up. Podcast is awesome and really valuable for the community. So thanks for everything you're doing too.
Awesome. You're the man, Neil.
All right. Talk soon.